Jana Vallabha Girivaratari Gopi Jana Vallabha Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So chapter 10. Viduruvacha Antahite Bhagavati Antahite Bhagavati Antahite Bhagavati Brahma Loka Pitamaha Brahma Loka Pitamaha Brahma Loka Pitamaha Antarhite Bhagavati Brahma Loka Pitamaha Praja Sasarja Katita Praja Sasarja Katita Praja Sasarja Katita Daihikir Manasir Vibhu Daihikir Manasir Vibhu Daihikir Manasir Vibhu Prajasasarja Katita Daihikir Manasir Vibhu Viduruvacha Antahite Bhagavati Brahma Loka Pitamaha Prajasasarja Katita Daihikir Manasi Vibhu Viduruvacha Antahite Bhagavati Brahma Loka Pitamaha Prajasasarja Katita Daihikir Manasi Vibhu Viduruvacha. Sri Vidura said, Antahite, after the disappearance, Bhagavati, of the personality of Godhead, Brahma, the first created living being, Lokapitamaha, the grandfather of all planetary inhabitants, Praja, generations, Sasarja, created, Katita, how many, Daihikihi, from his body, Manasi, from his mind. Vibhu, the great. So we see here it's explaining how Brahma has created all the planetary inhabitants from his body, from his mind. Yeah. And it's talking about how great he is. Translation. Sri Vidura said, Sri Vidura said, "O great sage, please let me know how Brahma, the grandfather of the planetary inhabitants, created the bodies of the living entities from his own body and mind after the disappearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead." Responsively, please. Sri Vidura said, "O great sage, please let me know how Brahma, the grandfather of the planetary inhabitants, created the bodies of the living entities from his own body and mind after the disappearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead." So there's no purport to this one here. But this chapter here, I'll just give a little bit of a synopsis of the chapter. Essentially, Vidura is asking, in the beginning 3 verses here, he asks a few questions. And then the chapter kind of gives a synopsis of the types of creations he does. So he creates basically 10 different types of creation he does. And this is, you'll see later on, basically from verses 18 to 29, it's being explained by Maitreya Rishi. And so he talks about, first off, the immovable living entities, living movable jivas, meaning plants, things like that, And then he talks about the lower species, meaning animals. There's 28 different types of animals. Of course, there's many animal species, but there's 28 different types of animals that he talks about. And then, of course, human beings and the devatas. These are good. So this is the Vishaga, because he's asking questions here about Vishaga. And as we know in the Bhagavatam, in a Mahapurana, it's considered that there's 10 topics of a Mahapurana, which is explained in the first verse of the 10th chapter of the second canto. Atrashaga, Visagascha. I can't remember the whole verse, but anyway, the first thing it points out about the Shaga and Vishaga. So Shaga means creation. It means the primary creation, which is done by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then it talks about the secondary creation, which is done by Lord Brahma. So what happens is from his own body, the Lord expands the universes. And this is explained in different places in the Bhagavatam and also in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Is explained in detail. So the Lord, he expands himself. I won't go into the detail of it because it's quite involved. But he expands himself essentially as Karana Dakashaya Vishnu. So Karana means causal. And he lies down on the causal ocean. And as he's lying on the causal ocean in mystic slumber, then all the universes come out of the pores of his body. So there's billions of universes just emanating, like little bubbles. And then they're like golden bubbles, and they I don't know if you ever seen these bubble machines, or when we were in Barcelona recently, they had this like a really big like hoop like this, and the kids were playing with it, and the bubbles were gigantic. And you see what happens to the bubbles is they coagulate together, and you see them when you're washing dishes or whatever. The bubbles coagulate together. So the same thing happens with the universes. The bubbles, they coagulate together, and then they sit down on the causal ocean. And so this is the primary creation. And then the Lord also, he enters into these universes as Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. And then he lies down on the Garbhodak ocean, which half fills the universe. The ocean comes from his sweat. And it half fills the universe. He lies down on that. But it's like, his sweat's not like our sweat. Like, our sweat is, like the kirtans, we saw devotees dancing, that they get real sweaty, and the sweat tends to be quite, not to have the most pleasing aroma anyhow, let's put it that way. But the Lord's perspiration is very fragrant, very beautiful. Actually, I was reading something the other day which is really interesting. When Brahma, like he's offered his prayers for creative, energy. Before that, he was sitting on top of the lotus, and he's trying to figure out what's going on. And he heard the advice to perform tapasya. Then he actually saw the lotus, because initially he couldn't see anything. It was just darkness, and he couldn't see anything. He couldn't see where he was. He didn't know what was going on, and he couldn't see anything. But then at one point, he saw. Through his performance of austerity for 100 years, then he saw the lotus. He saw the stem of the lotus. He saw the Lord where the lotus had come from, and then he was looking at the Lord, and he saw the garland around the Lord's chest, and from the garland was chanting the prayers of the Vedas. This garland's not chanting any prayers. So it's like everything associated with the Supreme Personality of God. It is just extraordinary. We cannot conceive of these things. It's just like with our body, the sweat stinks, basically. But with the Lord's body, the sweat is so fragrant. It's so, to touch that sweat is so enlivening. And even like we go and swim in the Ganges River, that is, is coming from the Karuna ocean. So that is also being produced from the body of the Lord. Everything Krishna describes in the 10th chapter of the Gita. He says, Aham savasya prabhu mata savam prabhatate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvitaha. That I am the source of all spiritual worlds. Everything emanates from me. The source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything's coming from Krishna. So initially, and this is described also in the Vedic text, how initially there was nothing. There was just the Lord. And then from his existence, everything's come. All the creations have come. So when he so the point of saga. So then he expands himself into Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. Garbhodakshaya Vishnu enters into each of these bubbles, these universal bubbles, these unders. They're like eggs, and then inside the bubbles it's hot, so he starts to sweat. He fills up the bubble half with water. So this universe we're in is one of the smaller universes. It's 4 billion miles across. Some of the universes are much bigger than that, much bigger. There's Brahmas with millions of heads. So you can imagine our Brahma only has 4 heads. So a universe with millions of heads must be a lot bigger than this universe. And so then. He lies down. Seshashayi forms a couch. He lies down on Seshashayi, and then while he's lying down there, Brahma, this lotus stem sort of bursts out from his navel because the water's splashing. It's quite violent. The water's splashing, and there's water in his navel, and then this the lotus stem grows out of that, and then Brahma is born on top of that lotus. So this is all the point of the first creation. And then Brahma, we see, in the previous few chapters, he's bewildered about what he's supposed to do. He doesn't even know who he is. He doesn't even know where he is. He knows nothing. Because he's in this situation where he can't see anything. He's got it's just like, someone was talking about this the other day. It's like, if we were in a situation where we had to do something, we had no resources, we had no knowledge, we had no money, we had nothing. How would we do it? Most of us probably couldn't. Well, you'll have to provide this, you have to give that, you'll have to give that, so I can do it. It's just like Prabhu's a gardener. But if he had no seeds or no plants, no tools, not even any soil, how would he do it? So we see generally in our activities, we need facilities, we need resources, we need support. But Brahma had nothing, and yet he did it. So how did he achieve that? Any thoughts? He had darshan, he prayed. What did he do? If you go through the last chapter, what did he do? Vishnu in his heart. But what did he do? These are all part of the truth, but what did he do? How did he approach it? Did he think, okay, now I'm going to go and get the tools, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that? He prayed to Krishna, yeah, but ultimately what did he do? He surrendered. He completely surrendered. He said, I cannot do this. I need your mercy. I need to be empowered by you. I need your protection. I need your guidance. And so he was able to do it because he surrendered to Krishna. Krishna provided, and Krishna says this also in the Chatta Sloki. What's that verse? The third verse. I can't remember it right now. How Krishna says that I dwelling within is the super's whole. He gives the intelligence. He gives the guidance. So Krishna guided him on how to do this. And for me, with this, like we see how Brahma, he performed this. I mean, if you look at this universe, or even just this, not even this planet, just this one little area we live in. You look out the window and you see trees and grass and birds and animals and goannas and snakes and so many things. This all came from Brahma, and he had nothing. So it's an enormous task. It's phenomenal what he did. I mean, I couldn't imagine doing the same thing. It's phenomenal what he did, and he started with nothing. So this is the power of surrender, and this is one of the sort of lessons, if you like, that really comes out of this pastime for me, is the power of surrender, is how he surrendered completely to Krishna or Vishnu, Narayan, and because of that surrender, he created this extraordinary universe with all its different living entities. And many you can see, like there's I can't remember which canto it's on. That one of the Bhagavatams is a painting on the cover of Lord Brahma. It's a pinkish painting, and it's showing how all these different jivas come out of his body. Shiva comes from between his eyebrows, and Atri comes from his thumb, and Vashishta comes from here, and this one comes from there, and all these different jivas come out of his body. And he's it's not like he's procreating with his wife or something. They're just coming out of his body. And it's the same as like with Lord Vishnu, when he creates Brahma. He just lies down on the causal ocean. I mean, Lakshmi's there massaging his feet, but it's not like he needs to engage in the act of procreation. It just, Brahma, the lotus just grows out of his navel, Brahma just appears there. And so, these are not ordinary living entities. They're not like you or I, where we need to take assistance from somebody else. But so we see how Brahma, just because of his complete surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and because of his prayers, he was empowered to create this universe, and he was given direction from within. Krishna says in the Gita, I destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness within, from within the heart. He destroys this ignorance. But this comes, as we see, in the 14th chapter, Krishna explains to Arjuna, he says, Deveshi Gunamai, Mama Maya Durataya, Mame Vijay Prabhatyante, Mayam Etam Tarantite. He's explaining how this divine energy of mind, consisting of three modes of material nature, is very difficult to overcome. He says, Mam E Vijay Prabhatyante, but those who surrender unto me can easily cross beyond it. So this is a really important lesson for us. Is the process, not only the process of surrender, but the potency of surrender. If we're able to surrender to Krishna, then we can accomplish so much. But if we hold back, and this is what's happening. I remember years ago listening to a lecture, and the devotee who was giving the lecture was making this point: the degree we hold back, the degree we don't surrender, that's how much we're entangled in the material nature. But if we surrender completely to Krishna, the material nature lets go of us completely, because she has no influence there. And seeing how Brahma was in this situation where he had nothing at all. He didn't even, as I said, he didn't even have awareness of who he was, or where he was, or what he was meant to do. But he performed tapasya. He surrendered to Krishna, and he was faced with the most enormous task, to create this universe. Reminds me of the situation of Srila Prabhupada. if we look at Prabhupada, he how old was he when he left India? 89 years old? Huh? 69. Well, he left India at 69. I mean, most people at that time, especially in Australia, the kind of concept is, well, go and play a little bit of bowls now and then. I'll go down the club, meet my friends, and have a few beers, and that's like retired life. But Prabhupada at this age, he was his focus. You read in Lilamrita and places like that. He talks about he met his spiritual master in 1922, and the instruction his guru gave him when he first met him, first time he met him, was, you should preach this Krishna consciousness in the English language, because you could see that he could speak English. So he wanted him to preach in English language. And then, he was always meditating on how to fulfill this instruction of his spiritual master. Then in 1933, I think it was in December 1933, Prabhupada wrote a letter to his Guru Maharaj, how can I serve you, basically. He was asking, I'm a Grihasta, I'm not like your sannyas disciples, I can't do these things. And then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wrote back to him, about 2 weeks before he passed away, he wrote back to him, and he gave him practically the same instruction. You write books in the English language. Actually, I think it was 1936. He got initiated in 33. So it was probably 1936 or 38 or something. I can't remember. But he said it will do good for you and it will do good for others. Essentially, something to that effect. And so we see that he got the same instructions. So the next number of years, he was constantly meditating on how he could fulfill this instruction. And so then, as a result of that meditation, as a result of that instruction, Srila Prabhupada in the early 60s, I think it was about 1965, got on a steamship. The steam, they called it a steamship, but it wasn't a steam, it was diesel, the Jaladuta, and went to the US. And he describes that when he landed there in the US, he got off the boat, he looked left, he looked right, he had no idea what to do. No idea at all. It was a completely foreign country. And you read in that verse, Srimad Bhagavatam, he's praying, he's saying, my Lord, I don't know why you've brought me here to this horrible place. Because keep in mind, he was living at Radha Damodar Temple in Vrindavan. And the place where it was just outside his kitchen window was considered by Gaudiya Vaishnavas at that time to be the center of the universe. Because this is the place where the 6 Goswamis, I don't know if it's still there, because they've paved over the whole courtyard now. But you have Rupa Goswami Samadhi, and just next to Rupa Goswami Samadhi, there used to be this pit about 2 foot by 3 foot. I'm not sure if it's still there or not. And the Goswamis, they'd come together, they'd meet every day and discuss, and then they'd take prasad. And this pit was said to be the place where they washed their hands. So there's dust from there was, they washed their hands and rinsed their mouth and they spat there. So this dust was considered to be very, very special. And so this was, for Gaudiya Vaishnavas, this is a very, very spiritual place. But Prabhupada gave up that to come to the West to fulfill the instruction of his spiritual master. So this required great surrender. How many of us could just, like here living in New Govardhana, we have a very comfortable situation. A very nice environment, weather, living condition, association, etc. How many of us would be willing to do that and go to a foreign country where we don't know anyone? Prabhupada had 40 rupees, was it? And 2 trunks of books and some oats. How many of us would be prepared to do that? Me, when I go traveling, I've got 2 suitcases, got everything I could possibly think I'll need, like all my warm weather clothing, all my cold weather clothing, all my medical things, and this thing and that thing. But how many of us would be prepared to just go on a boat? And huh? Foolhardy. People think you're crazy. But Prabhupada did it. And this was in the mood of fulfilling the instructions of his spiritual master. He was prepared to do whatever he had to fulfill the instructions of the spiritual master. And this is surrender. And you read in that prayer, Srimad Bhagavatam, where he's praying to Krishna, he uses this This prayer, I'm your puppet, just make me dance, make me dance, make me dance as you like. So he's fully accepting that he is dependent upon Krishna. He's fully accepting he has no independent capacity to achieve anything. But only by the mercy of the Lord will he be successful. And this prayer is very, very wonderful prayer, because it's just showing his surrender. It's showing his actual mood of how he realizes that he's so dependent upon Krishna. And this is the situation for all of us. Is motivated by false ego, we feel we have so much capacity, we feel we have so much ability, but we're actually bewildered by false ego, thinking that we're the controller, we're the enjoyer, we're the doer in the activity. But we see in the lives of these great personalities, they're actually revealing to us the consciousness we need to have if we're able to achieve anything in this world, is that on my own I cannot do anything. Without your mercy I cannot do anything. And if you reflect on that, you'll see that everything we do, we can't do it without Krishna. Even things like eating, a simple thing like eating. Krishna's the fire of digestion. So you may put this into your mouth, but without that fire of digestion, how do you digest things? Or even to grow the thing. Krishna says, I'm the light of the sun and the moon. This is all coming from Krishna. It describes in the universal form how the sun and the moon are the two eyes of Krishna. So, earlier on in the third canto, it's describing how, the universal form, when he manifests various things, like when he manifests ears, then also the living entities are able, sound manifests at the same time, and the ability to hear manifests. So all these things, everything we're able to do actually comes from Krishna. Every capacity we have, every ability we have, he says, I'm the ability in man. So everything we have comes from Krishna. And in order for us to achieve anything, in order for us to understand or to know or to do, this all comes from Krishna. And so this is for me, this is a very, very important lesson that comes out from this section of the Bhagavatam. And the more we're able to overcome the influence of material nature, the more we'll be able to fix our consciousness upon Krishna, and the more rapidly we'll be able to return to the spiritual realm. Yeah. Any comments, questions at all? Yes, Prabhu.
Regarding the process of surrender that you have nicely explained, you gave the example of Srila Prabhupada, of his surrender. At the same time, we can see in the life of Srila Prabhupada that there was an enormous part of preparation, there was timing in his surrender.
Yeah.
So could you elaborate a little bit more about, because it was not that when he received his first instruction, he threw everything that he had in his hand and took the next steamship to New York. Can you elaborate a little bit more about the process of preparation and timing in our surrender?
Yeah, the time he spent in Vrindavan, I don't know if it was so much about preparation or just sadhana, which any Vaishnava performs. Because you'll see that, you go to places like Vrindavan, Mayapur, and you'll see there's so many sadhus there who are doing similar kinds of things. That they study the shastras, they learn verses, they might write books and things like that. They do so many things, in order to deepen their attachment, to deepen their dependency upon the Lord. That's the purpose of sadhana, is to remove the anarthas from the heart so we can become fully dependent upon Krishna. Because the anarthas in our heart stop us from becoming dependent upon Krishna. The anarthas cause us to think that I'm the controller, I'm the enjoyer, I'm the doer. This comes from anartha. Anartha means that which is not beneficial. So this desire to be the controller, the enjoyer, this is not beneficial. This is blocking us from surrendering to Krishna. So we see that. Now, I'm not saying that Prabhupada had anarthas, because obviously our understanding is he didn't. But still he was going through the same activities of sadhana that we all do. And as far as the timing, I mean, to me, this just seems to be the arrangement of Krishna. That he was, because when Prabhupada came to the West, it was like the perfect time. People were searching. And so we understand, it's just like when Krishna appeared, for instance, we just recently had Janmashtami. So he appeared on Janma Ashtami. Ashtami means the 8th day. But according to the scriptures, the moon was full. The moon became full. All the constellations aligned themselves to the most favorable astrological circumstance. So the timing, when Krishna appears, when different devotees appear, it's always the perfect time. And we see that, Prabhupada appeared the day after Krishna. So it's also there's significance in that. So all these, and it's interesting, the next chapter is all about time. All these arrangements were made by Krishna to facilitate his devotees. And you can see there's so many stories in the Bhagavatam, how Krishna makes these arrangements. The one story I always find quite extraordinary is in the first canto, how Yudhisthira was feeling depressed because of, he had chronic depression because of, he had to kill all these millions of people in order for him to be the king. And he was a righteous person, he was soft-hearted, and he just couldn't digest that. It was just too much for him. And so many people had tried to explain to him, no, this was a righteous war, this was a pious war. You're not guilty of any sin here because you are the rightful king, and you're just establishing the correct rule. But he couldn't accept it. So many great sages come. Vyasadeva himself tried to explain this to him. Krishna tried to explain this to him. The Supreme Personality got it, and he couldn't accept it. But then, when Bhishma was passing away, he was lying on the bed of arrows at the Battle of Kurukshetra when he was passing away. Yudhisthira came down there and heard Bhishma speak, and then all his reservations were destroyed. So why is it that Krishna couldn't convince him? Krishna is the Supreme Person of God. He says, that I'm the source of knowledge, remembrance, forgetfulness. Why couldn't he convince him, but Bhishma could? Bhishma is just an ordinary jiva. The point is that Krishna was making this arrangement for the glorification of his devotee. So we see the same in the lives of all the acharyas. That Krishna makes these arrangements to glorify his surrendered devotee. Because the surrender, it describes in the, I think it's the 9th canto of the Bhagavatam, Saranam Hridayam Mayam Saranam Hridayam Tu Aham, Maranyat Te Managapi. I can't remember the last line. Anyhow, basically, Krishna is explaining that I am in the heart of my pure devotees. The pure devotees are in my heart. I know nothing but them. They know nothing but me. So when one has that degree of surrender, then, as the acharyas have described, you purchase Krishna. Krishna becomes controlled by that surrender, by that love. So, therefore, because of that love, Krishna made so many arrangements for the glorification of Srila Prabhupada. Just you think of the Bhagavatam, right? There's 18,000 verses. Most of the verses have got purports to them. How much effort did Srila Prabhupada put in to writing this Bhagavatam? Every morning he would rise early and dictate the Bhagavatam. The Gita, he had written a manuscript for the Gita. The manuscript was stolen. Didn't give up. He wrote another manuscript. Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's like if you just look at what Prabhupada accomplished, it's extraordinary. Even in, I think it's Time Life. There's a magazine in the US called Time Life. They did this thing some years ago about the 10 most prominent people in the last century, and Prabhupada was in the top 10 because of what he achieved. Even the materialists recognize his achievements were extraordinary, and they'll think, oh well, he's just very capable or whatever. But from the Vaishnava perspective, we understand this is because of his surrender to Krishna. This is his glory, his surrender. It's not that Krishna just did everything, he empowered him. No, because he surrendered, Krishna empowered him. So it comes from surrender. Krishna can achieve anything. There's nothing that Krishna can't do. One time, someone was trying to, there's a game the Gurukulis used to play called Stump the Swami in Mayapur. I remember Prahlad telling me about this. And so they tried to ask sannyasis questions they couldn't answer. And they always were, trying to figure out something. So one time, someone tried to stump the Swami with Prabhupada. And they said, is your Krishna so great that he can create a mountain he can't lift? Prabhupada said, yes, and then he will lift it. This is the nature of Krishna. There's nothing he can't do. Yes, he can do something that he can't do, and then he'll do it. Or he can create a mountain he can't lift, and then he'll lift it. That's the nature of Krishna. So there's nothing he can't do. So if he wants his pure devotee to be glorified in a particular way, then he'll do it. And this is what happened with Prabhupada because of it. And the real essence is because of the surrender. Not because Prabhupada was a great Sanskrit scholar or he was a prolific author or anything like that. He was surrendered to Krishna. That's the essence of it, his surrender. And that's not ordinary. It's just like, oh yeah, I'll surrender. I can surrender this. No, his whole life was just about pleasing Krishna. And if you look at any of the Gaudiya Vaishnava acharyas, not just Gaudiya Vaishnava, any acharya in any line, you'll see that the Alvas in the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, it's the same thing. Is they just have this complete surrender to the will of the Lord. Whatever it is the Lord wants, they'll do that. And that's why they're glorified. Because they've given their life to Krishna. And sometimes devotees will say, oh yeah, I'm just 24 hours a day engaged in service. Really? Do you understand what that means? It means like Prabhupada has no other thought, or these great acharyas, they have no other thought than how to serve and please the Lord. How can I spread his glories? Their whole life is dedicated to that. Surrender is we can say the word easily, but to do it's not an easy thing. Well, it is easy, but it's not easy. It depends. If we want to hold on to our attachments, then it's not easy. But if we let go of our attachments, it is a very easy thing. Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. That was wonderful. I'm able to relate to the surrender. That's what we do, the Sashtanga Namaskar, when we fall at the feet of the Lord. That's something we do. I'm a little bit confused how that word surrender or the act of surrender is interpreted as pure love for the Lord. Could you please clarify that for me?
Yeah, I can try. Like when we, to a large extent, when we do things like we offer our obeisances to the Lord or Prabhupada stuff, to some extent that's external. Because like when we're offering our obeisances, does that mean like we're bowing down and in our consciousness we're accepting that I'm your eternal servant? I just want to be an instrument in your hands. There's nothing I want to do other than please you. Is that what's going on internally? Probably not. We're just going through the motions. So this is part of the process of sadhana bhakti. And through Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, you do all these things in a regulated way, and the process helps us to purify ourselves of anarthas. This is why Vaidhi sadhana bhakti is very important. Some devotees have said, no, I'm not interested in Vaidhi, I just want to go, and get more involved in these higher things. But no, you can go and do. There's one time, someone was reminding me of this story the other day, one of the devotees, we were talking about this. One time Prabhupada was in Vrindavan, and one of his disciples came and would offer obeisance to Prabhupada, and he told Prabhupada, I'm going to live at Radhakund. And you know what Prabhupada was, because he was thinking this is very, very elevated, I'll become a very elevated devotee. And Prabhupada said, there are already enough monkeys living in Radhakund. Yeah? So he's basically saying is because your consciousness is not ready for that, you'll just think of sex life. So we have to purify ourselves. We have to purify ourselves of the anarthas. Otherwise, we'll just revert to this. It's just like, Krishna says to Arjuna in the Gita. Arjuna is saying, look, I don't want to fight. I'm going to go live in the forest. And Krishna says to Arjuna, but you're a Kshatriya. You will just revert to that nature. We see that when the Pandavas, when they went to the city of Drupad, and they Arjuna in that Swayamvar, he won Draupadi. But Drupad was concerned that because they were in the guise of Brahmanas, and he was worried that, did my daughter marry a Brahmana? I mean, Brahmanas are glorious, but I really want my daughter to marry a Kshatriya. So he sent Drishtajumna, his son, to follow them, and they went back to the potter's cottage. And when they were lying there at night, Drishtajumna, he was outside the window listening, and he could hear them talking about weapons and astras and this thing and that thing, battle formations and stuff. So he understood they were Kshatriyas, because the Kshatriya's nature is that's what they talk about. And so then Drishtajumna, he went back to Drupad. He said, "Don't worry, your daughter's married Kshatriyas into a Kshatriya line." So it's just the nature will come out. And so the idea of the process of sadhana bhakti is to purify the nature, the conditioned nature, to remove all these different anarthas, and then the true nature of the jiva comes out. And what is the true nature of the jiva? Jivera swarupahoy krishnena nityadas. This is the true nature. We're eternal selves in Krishna, and the nature of that relationship is love. So through the process of surrendering by following sadhana bhakti, because sadhana bhakti, by removing the anarthas, we naturally surrender. Because if you look at sadhana bhakti, it's all focused around serving Krishna. So naturally the love is going to come out. It's just like in a relationship, with a father to a child, for instance. The mother's carrying the child for 9-10 months in the womb, so naturally she has this bond, this connection with the child. It's just a natural thing, connected by the umbilical cord. It's natural. Father, not quite the same. But through the relationship of service, of looking after the child, feeding the child, bathing the child, caring for the child, guiding the child, then the love develops. So the relationship of service, the relationship develops. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki, Jai Nitya Gaur Premanandi.